Ballers! Don't mind if I weigh in on this Mythic Plus situation, do you? Good, because I'm going to. My God, have you guys looked at the actual official WoW? Don't forget your MMO champion. Forget your Reddit. Have you guys looked at the official forums recently? Holy shit! What's happening? What's going on? This is bad. This is bad. This is really bad. I looked at the US forums, and there's 50 posts or something on the front page of the Dungeons and Forums. It's, good 30 of them are about Mythic Plus. Went over to the EU, same. Oh, man. Really is looking bad. And in fact, it's the feedback I've been hearing from many of you that the Mythic Plus system is crumbling hard. So I decided to look into it. That is why I'm here now. And yes, it has been quiet on YouTube. I am working on a legacy video at the moment. That's one of the bigger reasons. I've been using every ounce of hours I have to work through that. But not only that, I'm in Holland tomorrow for just a couple of days because it's the first wedding of people in our little PG community. People who met while at PreachCon. There have been several Preach Gaming babies, you dirty bastards, but this is the first official wedding, so I am going to it, and I'm very excited. It should be fun, so I'll be on a plane in a few hours. Anyway, what's happening here? I looked back over a lot of things. One of the bigger changes in BfA was, of course, the movement of Tyrannical and Fortified to M+2, and introducing that earlier. This was done because people hit a massive wall in Legion when those affixes came in, because before that point they never had to learn what the dungeon did. They never had to learn what the dungeon did, and then suddenly they would just walk into this arena where they were being hit by all the affixes at once. So they could have the 2 affixes you would get at 4 and 7, and then they would walk into +10 and they'd be like, oh my God, and now everything's just got super powerful. All the trash is now mega powerful. All the bosses are now mega powerful, and the groups would crumble. And it was an issue at the time for players. So Blizzard thought back and said, well, the only way we can really solve this is if we introduce Fortified and Tyrannical earlier so that people gradually increase their knowledge of what's dangerous with trash and what's dangerous with bosses, and then we can slowly introduce other affixes on top of that. But people should be learning what the trash and bosses do much earlier before having the affixes, then having that thrown on them. Hasn't quite worked out because people just aren't figuring it out. That's the problem. They're just not figuring it out, and it's not helping at all. But there's a number of issues all colliding at once here. Like most things with World of Warcraft, it's so big and so varied and so wide that a lot of people like to say this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem. But in fact, it's usually a combination of many different things all happening together. So if we were to just throw ideas at a board here as to why it looks as if Mythic Plus is probably going to be nerfed based on what I'm seeing here, I wouldn't be surprised to see that. The upgrading gear we get in 8.1 might alleviate this a little bit. We'll have to see where Blizzard goes with this, but it feels very much like Cataclysm. I don't know about you guys who were around during Cata, but looking at the feedback in the threads here, it feels very much like Cata. But there's a number of problems. Let's throw some ideas at the board. One, BfA dungeons are harder. I think that's fair to say. BfA dungeons are harder than Legions. The trash mechanics in general are far more prevalent, right? There's a lot more trash mechanics going on, and trash generally is far more condensed, meaning ninja pulls are... I can reel off a huge list of potential ninja pulls that can go on, whereas Legion dungeons in a lot of ways were pretty linear. If you think about them in terms of layout and design, they were pretty much a corridor for a long way. But if you look more towards BfA dungeons, like Waycrest is literally corridors, but it has multiple ways of going around it. And there's also very small corridors. They're like hyper corridors rather than a dungeon corridor, which is a dungeon corridor. If you're not sure what I'm talking about with corridors and linearity, means that it might even feel like it's a wide open area. You could have lots of space, but the way you traverse it is in a very straightforward line. It's very simple, and the trash is usually reasonably spread out, so you can do individual pulls if you want to, or bigger pulls should you want to do that. You'd have to go out of your way to make that happen, is a good way of saying it. But in BfA, ninja pulls and patrols and things like that are far more relevant. And that's because they wanted people to get more benefit and more interest out of dungeons in order to fix what an issue in Legion was, which is trash that didn't have enough mechanics. It certainly had more than Warlords of Draenor did, but obviously towards the end of Legion, people were pulling like half the dungeon and just doing laps while people just AoE'd it down, which is another issue they wanted to solve going into BfA dungeon design. So that's already like 3 different things. On top of that, there's less defensives and stuff that are usable by people. And not only that, the global cooldown change comes into play here. Can't just pretend it didn't happen. A lot of people's defensives are on the global cooldown, which makes responding to stuff that little bit more difficult. Not only that, they've upped the amount of things that require more than just the basics. Like a basic I would consider is a stun and kick. A lot of people can't do that. Like, let's be honest, a lot of people can't do that. But on top of that, we're now looking at soothes, we're looking at purges, we're looking at enrage, dealing with those kinds of things. Things that now need to be moved away. If we look at infested, we now need to mix in CC, short cooldown stuns, and managing that effectively, otherwise it gets completely out of control. These are all things that we have to take into account. Another thing we have to take into account here is the tank changes. Tanks were completely rehashed and redesigned in order to balance them out effectively, which took a lot of strength away from each of the tanks and rebalanced it into magical damage, which is relatively prevalent in BfA. And so my point here is there's a load of different things happening here at once. Then saying this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem, isn't helpful, because which these things all added together? Is it a combination of them all? Is it all this kind of stuff? There's a huge amount of changes going on here, including class pruning in general. And classes working differently, all adding together. But needless to say, this is definitely causing a lot of problems. Another problem is, of course, raiders and... I heard them referred to as content pushers. I think that's a relatively fair thing to say, because AP has been removed from Mythic Plus. Like, gaining artifact power was something a lot of people, and legendaries, we can't ignore the legendaries, there were a lot of people who were very overgeared running Mythic Plus dungeons and going into pugs, and I know this because I did it, jumping into Mythic Plus pugs that are lower than what I need for my weekly chest. It's not somewhere I'm going to get an upgrade from because, that's very unlikely to happen anyway, but I can jump on my very overgeared character into a lower Mythic Plus, guarantee the success of that dungeon just by me being there because I overgear it so much. So if I'm on a damage dealer, for example, I can blow it up, or I can go in on a tank and I can tank everything and I won't die, in order to get AP and upgrade my artifact weapon, and of course have a chance at legendaries. There's no incentive there anymore. There's no incentive whatsoever for content pushers, which are just all I'm referring to there is overgeared people, to exist in that environment. There's absolutely zero reason to be there, and therefore they're not going to go there whatsoever. So that all that support, which Blizzard does like to use, let's be honest here, Blizzard does like to use higher geared or better players, however you want to look at it, to help out in lower content, and they incentivize them to do that. We've seen that for years now. But in terms of these lower dungeons, absolutely no reason whatsoever. No reason whatsoever. And of course, that is a cyclical problem, because the pugging world gets worse, which is hard because it's been pretty bad for a long time, but the pugging world gets worse. So less and less like re-rolled content pushers, right? The guys who are very good but on a weaker character, who you might have had in there, don't want to go in there because it's not successful. There's no chance of loot. So they'd rather wait for friends or re-roll with somebody else, and therefore there's less and less people circling around this washing machine of players that are there that maybe can swing it into your benefit. And there's also the bigger question, which I think is the main point of this video, is where exactly is the learning curve of WoW right now? Where exactly is the learning curve of WoW? It's a good question. I went back all the way to, and I really suggest you watch this video, to 2013. That's 5 years ago. 5 years ago, where I did the... during Mists of Pandaria, I did the accessibility and apathy video. It was quite big at the time, where we looked at the fact that Blizzard had created an environment where players literally didn't know if they were doing things right or wrong, because the game wasn't informing you, because everything you did was successful until you hit a massive wall, a mountain, so to speak, and you either climbed up that mountain or you basically blamed everyone else and didn't do that content. This is also a big part of it, because the mountain right now is actually gotten a lot worse since then. And not only that, these systems that I talk about in that video have been in existence for such a long time that we've now got an entire player base in 2 generations of players who have been living this life for a long time, and now they're hitting a wall. I think it would be undeniable to say, and this is what I did, okay? This is what I'm basing this on. So you guys can check this. These threads are not hard to find. Is the guys who are really struggling, certainly in the 2 to sort of 8 category, are people who belong at like +8 because that's where their gear tells them to go. But if you look at their gear, and again, yeah, this is armory stalking a little bit, but you've got to get some context for what people are saying. So there's not many other ways of doing this. They're guys who have geared outside of the Mythic Plus world in basically the free loot world. Now, here's the issue, as I see it, and I think this is a big issue, is the free loot world is boosting people past their learning curve. Let me give you an example here. The free loot world is providing, 360 upwards, right? It's giving 360 upwards in this world. Where does that place you in terms of, Mythic Plus? Well, it places you quite high. That's 7, 8, 9. That's where you want to be, 7, 8, 9 and above. That's a bit of a problem, boys, because you've not done any learning before that. And everything you've done before that point is 100% successful. World quests, raw fronts, whatever it is, your weekly quest that you pick up down near your city to go and do some time walking dungeons or something like that. Everything you've done has been pretty much 100% successful. The game has not informed you at all that you might be the worst player ever because you've had a 100% success rate since you installed the game, right? It's very hard to work out if you're awful. Think about that for a minute. It's really hard. It's not that easy. There are not many clues. And when people start berating you, usually gamers aren't the kindest of people. And, they'll rage at you. They'll be like, you're just fucking terrible, the worst. And the likelihood is it's so, full of expletives and rage that you're going to put it down to that guy's just an asshole and it's nothing to do with me. Why would I listen to that dickhead, right? It's very hard to work out that you're garbage until you get into the real nitty-gritty of things because the game never informs you that you need to get any better, really. And then suddenly you hit a wall. And typically that wall is involving teamwork, which is something you also don't need at any other point before this. It's tricky, boys. What are they going to do about it? Well, my issue is they've created a situation where they've thrown a lot of gear at people. The next point of upgrade or next point of progression is already way past any learning curve and is a steep mountain to climb. And the likelihood is they're going to make it easier and let people in. They may even move Fortified and Tyrannical back to the higher keys and just say, this is for the higher guys to deal with, and we'd rather people have more successful runs be below 9 or below 10, because that makes people feel better, makes the community happier, rather than... Can Blizzard do anything about this? I don't know, man. I don't know, but that is my opinion on it. I'd love to see yours, and any other issues that I've not brought up in this video that are certainly contributing towards this current environment, which is clearly a problem. I don't know whether it's a majority or anything like that, but it's a problem for a lot of people. I think that's fair to say. It's a problem for a lot of people. It's very widespread. The people are getting vicious about it. The sheer quantity of suggestions I've seen for punishments, my God, you guys should get a job somewhere. Evil. You should... Jesus Christ. They should be... if you leave a Mythic Plus dungeon, by the way, you should have your Mythic Plus cash cancelled. That's one thing I read today. Fun times. Either way, guys, I'll leave it to you. I will see you on Friday is when I am back in the office. I love you all. Bye-bye.